podcast now. Did you know? Welcome, podcasters. Those of you who are listening on Apple and Spotify and Amazon Music and wherever else you can put in the RSS feed. We are now audio as well as video, which means I realize. Do you realize what we've become now?
I don't know. I left for a day and came back, and suddenly there was an RSS feed.
That's right. Since
I leave for one day, and all of a sudden it's everywhere. What are you doing?
And here, and Mel, who is our magnificent video editor, thanks. Those of you who watch on YouTube and recognize we have these marvelous 15-minute clips. It's thanks to Mel, because she snowboards her way through all of our chatter and jibber jabber and picks out the best moments of that. So Mel and I somehow managed to realize that we could put all of our audio that we can in fact download as an MP3 off of unauthorized TV and put up for those of you who listen, who prefer simply to listen. Although we do encourage you to subscribe to Unauthorized TV, to join us in the live streams and be able to chat with us, and watch the images and so forth. Do you understand what this makes us now? We are live on Unauthorized TV, and of course also on Telegram, my channel, Fencing Bear at Prayer, which means I am, of course, both Professor Rachel Fulton Brown and Fencing Bear at Prayer. And if you're just completely confused about who I am in Telegram, Ancilla Marii, which is the Latin for handmaid of Mary. So we are live streaming on Unauthorized TV and Telegram. We post videos, which is our visual format, at Unauthorized and on YouTube. And now we are audio only in our podcast form through rss.com, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other places where you can stick in that RSS feed. So what does that make us?
Viruses?
No, a Trinity! Come on, work with me, lady. So we are live as the Father, incarnate and visual as the Son, and spirit only as a podcast. I am sure that's just straight up blasphemy, and now we're doomed. The demons are going to come.
Forever.
The demons are going to come get us and tell us stop being so satanic and divisive. If you came because you saw my ad casting today with Johnny Depp being chased by a mob of ortho bros, and the caption being, "I only said and the Son," which then, of course, with the filioque gave me my understanding of how we now exist in the digital realm as a Trinitarian manifestation, because the Father of all of the streaming records both the video and the audio for us. I also record it. I hope I'm recording on my own laptop. So I'm not sure what that makes of but the Father is the source of both the video and the audio. Which therefore means the Father, UATV, is the source of both the video that we put up. It would be a more perfect analogy if I put that video on the YouTube too. And now in the hopefully even more widespread format of the Spirit flying simply as I'm sure this is working, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I get chased by hordes of ortho bros as well. So.
And the Son.
That's even without the filioque clause.
Well, the thing is, I think our version is actually properly ortho, because we get the audio only from the unauthorized, but that feeds into the video too. But the audio pigeon, the messenger pigeon, the carrier bird version that flies on our electromagnetic waves as a dove, does it come through the Sun or not? You guys, you realize this is a long commercial to please subscribe to all of these different ways to catching our live stream, which is both incarnate and digital. And we're trying to figure out what that means. Are there good analogies in our own experience for understanding that mystery that we call the Trinity?
There's definitely good analogies for explaining the incarnation.
Well, this is the to be continued forever, because we are going to always be talking about God in some form or other. But this is my continuing to be continued off of the intervention that Milo arranged with E. Michael Jones and Patrick Coffin and me to talk to Owen about the Trinity. And one of the things that I talked about there was this analogy that I learned from Dorothy Sayers in her The Mind of the Maker, for talking about the Trinity, which, and it to this day, still the most living version of the description that I've ever come across. I do not like the scholastic, logical, dialectic version of things, and that's one of the in the UAT community. Although things have carried on in a rather different fashion from what we thought they would start with a simple debate on the Trinity. But anyway, the Orthodox version of things that Jim Bob was trying to articulate of the energies, I don't even know what he was talking about. Right? It's a sort of definitional game that I have not chosen to participate in, because I find it does not capture the living reality of the encounter with God that I think is what we are praying for, and certainly participating in the liturgy in the hope of touching.
It's like explaining sheet music note for note and with all of the notational marks, the time signatures and everything, versus sitting down and listening to the whole symphony. It's just a completely different experience.
She does it so much more concisely than I do. Exactly. Me and my linear verbal read endless books from the kilt says it's listening to music. Yes.
It's surround sound God in the liturgy, so we have to like step into that experience, and it's not really something that you can accurately describe if you're just going over the particulars of sheet music. I mean, it's good for some people, not for others, especially if you're inclined to want to have an experience.
Like we talk about our God as a living God. We want to live with him. We want to live in him.
Yes.
It's a sensory experience as well as an intellectual experience. And somehow those scholastic definitional descriptions, to me, get simply to that intellectual thing and lose out.
If you come into exposure to orthodoxy online, you're instantly going to be smacked in the face with that kind of scholasticism, because that's how it's translated on the internet with the debate me bro approach, which works for some people. I mean, there are a lot of people who need church matters explained to them like that, but I didn't come into orthodoxy like this. So for me, it was like looking at a foreign language. It was like hearing the symphony and then learning that later on people had such thing called sheet music and musical notation. Right. A completely different way of seeing the church. I don't think one is better than the other. It's just I think Westerners now they're over reliant on the scholastic, because Westerners are really, really intellectual.
Scientism and the fear of seeming irrational. Thanks Enlightenment. I mean, not even the mathematical debate stuff, which I think Owen has rightly called people on. The mathematical analogies are not, in fact, a proof of anything. They're nice mental sort of models, potentially. They don't convince me. Pythagorean triangle stuff doesn't convince me either. I often feel like Johnny Depp being chased by guys with lightsabers. not just saying and the sun, but saying, can you prove this? Prove what? Right? I'm trying to prove my faith. I can't prove to you faith. I can try to give you descriptions of things that seem to make sense to me and that chime with my experience. That faith only comes, as I experienced it, simply as a gift of the Spirit. It's there. It's always there. The gift is being constantly offered to us, and the problem being whether or not we can perceive it.
If your ears are open and you can hear the music or not.
Right. Or your eyes, and what do you see and what can you see. The book that Dorothy Sayers wrote about, where she talks about the Trinity, is called The Mind of the Maker. She says, well, it's foolish to worry about using metaphors to talk about God, because everything we talk about is in metaphor. Language is inherently metaphorical, and that it's always pointing to things through analogy, and fundamentally saying that, we use anthropomorphisms to talk about God. It's like we use anthropomorphisms to talk about everything because she says that's our only yardstick. Yeah. We are human. So if we are talking about flies or dogs or mountains or rivers or planets or the solar system or anything, we're always talking about it with ourselves as the yardstick for understanding. So to say, oh, we shouldn't talk about God using human categories, it's like, well, what else do we have? Those are what we have. Put your brain somewhere else that it isn't. It's like, well, think like an angel. We don't know how. We think only in analogy and metaphor about anything, not just God.
I mean, that's how human beings have created their language, taking little sonic polaroids of things, arranging them in a particular way. You couldn't represent something that you had that was beyond your own ability to see.
We put things together in our imagination from things that we've seen. Fancy word here is mimesis. We've been talking about mimetic when we talk about René Girard, and that comes from this representational copying, imitation, that everything that we do, I mean, we say it's art. E. Michael Jones has actually been talking about this over the last year or so, that, beauty is our mimesis. Beauty and art is our mimesis of nature or creation, or our response to, you were just now talking about music, right? The degree to which we are trying to represent our experience or apprehension of whatever it is that we call creation. And creation, of course, in the Creed, we talk about creation as both things visible and invisible, so that we understand that there are creatures there that we don't have sensory perception of, like angels. and that the invisible world is as real as the visible world, and that God is creator of all of those things. So the degree to which we try to represent these creatures in our own creations, it's all imitation. This mimesis is our imitational act. And that, I mean, what Rene Girard talks about is how pretty much everything we do as human beings is founded in imitation, primarily socially of each other, so that we see someone doing something and we want to imitate that. And that's how we learn, right? How do babies learn language? They learn it by imitating their parents and people around them speaking, so that you're always, we couldn't learn if we couldn't imitate.
Yeah, that baby gargle where they're trying to figure out the way to move. And one of the reasons why the masking that happened during the COVID era was so disastrous for developing children when they were very young is because they couldn't develop because they lost mimesis. They'd lost an ability to mimic people were doing with their mouths and facial expressions. So it is a huge part of developing as a human being able to mimic and copy and mirror back what you see.
And particularly, as you're saying, faces. The thing that we mirror most is each other's faces. Mirroring faces in our emotional expressions and in our reactions to beauty and feeling of belonging in a group. All of those things comes out of this mimesis of each other, this kind of mirroring, this imitation that we do with each other. That if we want to understand why the COVID stuff played out the way it did, it's because we're so mimetically inclined. We're going to copy each other. It's not mass formation. So, how does the mass formation work? Well, it's because we're imitating each other, and that seems to amp up.
Things are trending on the internet and in real life. Well, it's difficult to not be part of the group. It's difficult to be the anomaly from any group. It's not a comfortable experience. It can be quite painful.
But it's interesting that it is painful. It's like saying, I'm not imitating everyone else correctly. It's very, very painful not to be in sympathy and harmony with the way the rest of the group is behaving. Presumably also afflicts us when we're not imitating God, because that is in fact the image that we're made to be imitating. We're made to be the likeness of our Creator. Therefore, what we have to understand is the act of artistic creation. The mind of the maker is what we are invited to mirror by our creation.
This pain of being outcast from the group and not mimicking the group is somehow connected to removal from creative capacity, because human beings, as we've talked about, naturally city dwellers, naturally creators of cities. Humans live in tribes, groups. We're not independent. We're not able to live alone. Even in the beginning, God says it's not good for man to be alone. So he makes a helpmeet for Adam. So it seems like this inbuilt need to be with people, and then having that connection linked with our creative capacity somehow. Primarily, obviously, it's a biological procreation, but then it extends into everything else.
Cities are going to come in this because they're founded on murder. So what we want to understand is what's a work of art. Creating things, we're mimicking God. What is it we're mimicking? And this goes back to my little analogy about our UATV live streams with our videos and then our podcast, audio and visual. It's a funny meme that as soon as you invent wheels, say, hey bro, everything's a wheel. And you invent books, say, hey bro, the world's a book. And then you invent, mechanical clocks. Hey man, the world's a mechanical device. Now we're on computers, and so clearly what it is. Creation as a work of art and the effect of art on others once it's been manifest, but that incarnational element of creativity is the Father breathing, the Son carrying the. It's why in Christian theology we say that the creation is through the Son, that the Father is working through the Son to make things. And in medieval iconography, it's always Christ who is the one that's creator, because it's through the Son that all this fashioning happens. The making part.
Yes, he's the carpenter.
To record the videos to send them out, so we do them live, and anyway, all metaphors are ultimately inadequate. But the process of understanding ourselves, making in the image and likeness. My large frustration with the Trinity discussions is it shouldn't be about the Trinity; it should be about the incarnation. We should start there, because that's the only way we have contact with God. The way God reveals Himself to us is through these workings in time, because we're incarnate, and He made us incarnate. Incarnation as communication with us. All of the sort of proving the Trinity without us in the picture. Well, we can't, because as Sayers points out, we can't think about anything except through our own experience.